Opening statement. Welcome all members and officers to this Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting, which is due to government advice to the public to practice social distancing, will be held virtually with committee members and officers accessing the meeting from remote locations. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Please can everyone ensure that all mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda on Tuesday the 1st of September. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, because that will help minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. If any members or officers wish to speak, raise a point or a question, please use the instant messaging icon on the bottom left of the Skype window and simply type speak. And I will come to you in order of how I received the request. Please do not use the IM messaging to chat questions or comments. Right, I'll now ask the Scrutiny Officer to announce the names of the councillors in attendance at this meeting. Officers are asked to introduce themselves when I invite them to speak, and they should also ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. Right, over to the Scrutiny Officer for members in attendance, and then apologies, please. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of the recording, my name is Tracy Watson, Scrutiny Officer, and the members in attendance for the Corporate and Overview Scrutiny Committee today are Councillor John Paul Blundell, Councillor Nicole Burnett, Councillor Nora Clark, Councillor Jane Gebby, Councillor Tom Gifford, Councillor Cheryl Green, Chair, Councillor Martin Jones, Councillor Ross Penhale-Thomas, Councillor Kay Rowlands, Councillor Rod Shaw, Councillor John Spanswick, Councillor Tim Thomas, and invitees from the Recovery Panel, Councillor Stuart Baldwin, Chair, Councillor Richard Collins, and Councillor Alex Williams. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Tracy. Right, we move to item 2, and are there any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to declare a personal interest as I am the Chair of Evergreen Hall, which is mentioned in the report.
Thank you for that. Nicole, is there anyone else? There's nothing come up, so I will assume that there are no further declarations. Right, we'll move to item 3 on the agenda, and approval of the minutes. First of all, and I do apologise for the length of time, there's not a lot we could have done about it, the 4th of the 11th, 19. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Moved. That's me, Tim Thomas.
Tim Thomas.
Yeah.
Second. Second, Ross.
Ross, okay. We'll now move to the minutes of the 24th of January. Mover and seconder again, please.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just come in?
Yes, certainly.
Amendment to make on the 4th of the 11th
yes.
one.
Yes, by all means.
My declaration of interest is written down wrong. I'll send the Scrutiny officers what it is correctly, but they've written down that due to me being a non-paying member of Brackler ASE, that's not correct. Right. So I'll send the correct wording through to the officers so it can be changed.
Right.
Okay, everyone.
Thank you for that, John Paul. Are we all in agreement? We will amend the minutes accordingly. Okay, right, the minutes. Can I have a mover then with the amended version of Declaration of Interest from John Paul? Can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Moved. It's Tim.
Right, thank you. Okay. Right, we're going to move on now to item 4, and this is the findings and recommendations of the cross-party recovery panel. And I'm going to invite the chair of said panel, Councillor Stuart Blundell, to present to us. I mean, appreciate that we were all there, and we say, but I think it's important. This is a public meeting that Councillor Blundell presents the report and the recommendations.
Chair, sorry, just to come in there, it's Councillor Baldwin is the chair of the recovery panel.
Oh, sorry, I thought I said Councillor Blundell, didn't I?
Yeah, no, it's.
I do apologise. I was looking at his picture there, and I said, no, of course it is Councillor Stuart Baldwin who was chair of the recovery panel. Thank you, Stuart. Over to you.
Thank you, Cheryl. And like you said, everybody would have seen and read the agenda item 4, and everybody, of course, that's in this committee was part of the recovery panel as well. So I don't intend on spending too much time in going through the report. You can see at item 1, which was for the purpose of the report, and it was to present the committee with the phase 1 findings and recommendations of the cross-party recovery panel, which are attached at Appendix A for endorsing by the committee to be submitted to Cabinet on the 15th of September 2020 in order to feed into the realignment of the authority's medium-term financial strategy and their corporate plan. And it's also to note the proposed next steps of the recovery panel on the selection of the key areas to examine in greater depth beyond September 2020, and to consider whether it wishes the work of the panel to continue. Section 2 takes you in relation to the connection to the corporate wellbeing objectives and the other corporate priorities. Section 3 gives you background in relation to the pandemic and the lockdown, and the section which shows that we were to establish the panel, and then section 4 and the current situation and proposal just shows the makeup of the panel, with the additional invitees being invited and inviting guest speakers from the selected areas that we wanted to investigate further. 4.3 talks about phase 1. It's taken a structured approach to the selection, and it's recommended that the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee consider and endorse the findings and recommendations attached in Appendix A to be submitted on the 15th. If we go down to section 5 and section 6, they're self-explanatory, and then section 7 talks about the Wellbeing and Future Generation Wales Act 2015 and those implications, and you can see then at 7.1 the varying implications that are already listed. Section 8 is on the financial implications, and there are no financial implications directly associated to this report at the moment. So then at section 9, the recommendations are for the committee is recommended to endorse the cross-party recovery panel findings and recommendations attached at Appendix A to be submitted to Cabinet on the 15th of September as part of the recovery process in order to feed into the realignment of the MTFS as previously mentioned, and then to note the next steps proposed for the recovery panel as outlined in paragraph 4.5 and consider whether it wishes this work of the panel to continue. I suppose that at this moment in time, as well as the chair of the cross-party panel, I'd like to thank all of the members that have been involved in this for what I consider to have been a very well-structured and attended and participatory approach, and something that I hope continues. And that's all I think that I want to say on the report, Chair.
Thank you for that, Stuart. I have got one person indicating to speak, Councillor Tim Thomas.
Chair, I'm happy to speak, but I do think Nicole and John Paul are before me. Happy to wait my turn.
Tim, I think, oh, sorry, Cheryl.
Sorry about that, Tim. They've already, it was,
oh, right,
they indicated to speak on the, it was John Paul on the minutes,
yeah,
and Nicole had a declaration of interest. You were the first person to indicate at this point.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. Silly me.
Yeah.
I as vice chair of this committee, I echo Stuart's words he just said. Unfortunately, during the last meeting, I had to leave towards the end, so I didn't get an opportunity to comment on one of the recommendations. Is this a good opportunity to comment on the recommendations, on whether they?
Which recommendation was it, Tim? Because there are several meetings and we will be going through the recommendations in order of the meeting. So if it's the first meeting, yes.
It's recommendation
8. 8.
And the final recommendation 16.
Right.
So are we going through all these recommendations in some sort of order then? Am I right in thinking that? Or?
If you look at your Appendix A, they are in order of the meetings because these are the result of several meetings, not just one.
Okie doke.
Okay, but I'm quite happy for you to speak to it now if you wish.
Oh, thank you. I'm just regarding recommendation 8. I think it's a good recommendation. You know, I mean, I am getting more and more referrals about homelessness, and I just think we could be a little bit more explicit on some of the the homelessness prevention schemes that are out there. And I just wonder if the recommendation could be a little bit more explicit and actually reference Housing First as a good scheme that we should be recommending. I think it's a little bit disappointing that there's no current Housing First schemes in Bridgend County Borough, unless I've got that wrong. There's some excellent schemes in Swansea, I think, and this is basically giving quite vulnerable people the opportunity to have a home and then to tackle all their other needs at a later date. And I think this is you know, a really important you know, scheme. So I'd like a bit more reference and make it a bit more explicit to Housing First for recommendation 8.
Sorry, Chair, could I just put on something on that? Valleys to Coast are already operating a Housing First scheme.
Yeah, I think is that a cross tenure scheme though, Stuart?
But it's a Housing First scheme that you've just asked about. So yes, there is Housing First schemes already operating in Bridgend.
I think, Tim, basically these were the recommendations that were agreed by everyone, and I feel it would be unfair now to really do anything significant. But I do take your point, and it's an important point. But I think, you know, that no one actually raised that at that meeting.
If I may, on my other point, Chair, and this is my fault, I acknowledge this. I had to leave the meeting a little bit early due to a work commitment. If I didn't have to leave that meeting, I would have raised that at the right time.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And that's recommendation 6. Beg your pardon. And that's about considering joining cooperative councils.
Oh, recommend 16.
Yeah. My concern of that, you know, in principle, I think it's very important that we as a council collaborate and share ideas with other councils. But I'm just looking at the membership of these, what are they called, cooperative councils, and I don't think we fit very well with them. There's some big city councils there, Newcastle, Bristol, Brent. And I don't think our characteristics match those local authorities. I think we'd be far better collaborating and sharing ideas with, you know, other neighbouring local authorities. I take the point that there is Cardiff in there, but they're a big local authority, and it's quite right that they want to share with some of the big English local authorities. But I think this is, we've got to respect the fact that we have Welsh devolution here, and we're dealing with different laws and principles than our English counterparts.
I appreciate what you were saying, Tim, but basically the recommendation is for the Cabinet to consider the potential. And I'm quite sure if they look at that potential, if it is obvious that Bridgend is not going to fit, that's exactly what they're going to come back with.
Fair enough.
And certainly, perhaps we could ask Cabinet to keep us informed of exactly what their findings are, should they take this recommendation.
I think that's very sensible, Chair. Thanks, though.
Okay, no problem. I've got Councillor John Spanswick next, please.
Chair, I'm not sure if Councillor Burnett want to speak on that issue first, or on the text box, or
She's after you.
okay.
You pressed first, John.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. As a comment in general, I think it's been very useful in the last, just over a month, how quick this panel has met and the various meetings we've had and the topics covered. And that just goes to show what we can do, in a short period of time. A bit like task and finish groups in the past. So really welcome the way it's worked to date, and long may it continue in the future. I take it you're going through the recommendations, but I just want to fully endorse all recommendations, but especially recommendation 1, which is asking Cabinet to add green spaces and leisure and culture onto the key list of priorities, which I don't think you can underestimate the value of green space and well-being, health and well-being. And it's great to see now that we've recommended that for Cabinet, and I fully support that and all the other recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, John. Nicole, was it on the cooperatives, Nicole?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm as you're aware, this is something I feel very strongly about, and it's something that aligns perfectly with the Welsh Government's agenda. They published a research paper in 2016 evaluating cooperative housing developments within Wales, and with an immensely positive set of case studies. So there are a lot of councils working along cooperative lines already. They also published in 2013 a paper on recognising the importance of cooperatives and mutuals within Wales. So we're not, this is nothing to do with devolution. This is around cooperative worker-owned models. This is about democratising our economy, and the fact that larger councils are currently counted as cooperative councils is just the fact that they are the early responders. They are setting the pace, and I don't see why Bridgend shouldn't join them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Nicole. I've got Councillor Jane Gebby now.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say very similar points to Nicole. I do not see why we in Bridgend, just because we are in Wales, do not meet any cooperative model. In fact, we've got lots of cooperative models that have been going on. Yes, they're very small term, and yes, they're very small scale, but we've had lots of little cooperatives throughout the pandemic.
Thank you for that, Jane. Right, I don't have anyone else indicating at the moment. We will go through the each recommendation. I understand the Chief Executive may wish to comment. Would you like to speak at this point, Mark?
I'll just make a few introductory comments, but I'm predominantly here to listen and obviously answer questions as well about any of the recommendations. I mean, I suppose as a starting point, just to echo what members have said, really, to thank the panel for the efficient and prompt way in which you've come up with, I think, what I would regard as a list of sensible recommendations in the main, and I'm sure Cabinet will also see it the same way. I mean, potentially when you get through some of the detail of each of the recommendations, it might be helpful if there's just some clarification from my point of view and point me towards some of the evidence, because I think we just need to be clear on what basis we're asking Cabinet to do some of the things. But broadly, I think it's a helpful list of recommendations, and together with those that no doubt will come from the Economic Task Force, I think we've got the makings there of a list of priorities really to take forward our recovery.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Sorry, excuse me. Do you mind if I just come in on that one as the chair? Mark, obviously there was quite extensive minutes that went along with each of those minutes that probably formulates the evidence and context to the recommendations that were put in. But we chose to only set a certain level of context within this report. Otherwise, I think we would have all been here at about 8 o'clock tonight, because some of the meetings went on considerably, discussing certain points, in particularly around homelessness and the agenda of the way the BCBC could be tackling vulnerable groups and homeless people within our county borough. So yeah, if Cabinet want a couple of reports and minutes to help them sleep at night, then there's plenty there for them to keep them going, I think. Isn't that right, Cheryl?
I think that's right, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That's helpful.
Thank you for that, then, Stuart. Right, we'll go through. I'll just read out the numbers of the recommendations, and then if anybody then suddenly feels they wish to speak, just indicate. Recommendation 1, 2 and 3. No. Recommendation 4, 5 and 6. No. Recommendation 7, 8, 9 and 10. Recommendation 11, 12, 13.
Chair, if I may, just on recommendation 11 and 12, just to pick up the point, and actually Councillor Baldwin's point really about the context, but the recommendation there, for example, to write C, which is entirely legitimate, that's panel's recommendation, but I think Cabinet, I imagine, would want to be clear on what basis we would be writing to V2C and would want to understand that evidence. That's a good example, I think, Councillor Baldwin, of where the evidence is clearly important, because Cabinet will not want to put their name to something without understanding specifically what it is that we are criticising and need to put right. And you know, I think I get the general point that the RSLs potentially should be doing more and should have done more with us. And if there's to be perhaps a second lockdown at any point, we'd want to learn those lessons. But I think that's an example where perhaps some of the background documents that you referred to or background evidence would be helpful to understand.
I think the background documents would be very helpful, Mark, to be perfectly honest, because it was really the figures that were presented to us was what actually prompted this recommendation. And I think if you were to look at those minutes of the closed meeting, you would see the points that really led us to wish to write to Valleys to Coast as the largest provider, RSL.
No, absolutely understood, Chair. I think the context, though, is important, isn't it, in terms of trying to build a relationship as well with our largest RSL. So I think the evidence becomes important in terms of making that point, but also trying to maintain that relationship moving forward, because they're not going anywhere and we're not going anywhere. So we need to be able to work together as well.
I'm sure that the chair of the panel, Stuart, it would be perfectly willing to speak with Cabinet, as would I, on this point if they needed any further information on this. Is that right? All right with you? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Would be available, certainly. I've got Councillor John Spanswick as indicated, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, on that point, and I know the previous meetings there held confidentially, but there's limited what we said, but there's a clear frustration felt, when I understood, with how Valleys Coast was perhaps not cooperating as well as they could have, especially during COVID. One, through furloughing their staff, so they couldn't carry out repairs, but also when it came to trying to house people who were in need, and it just appeared to be less of the social landlord and more just a landlord feel about the way they'd been operating and acting. And I don't think that's just this recent year. I think that's been the trend for a while, unfortunately, with Valleys Coast, and we do need to strike up a better deal with them then, perhaps in the future.
That's understood. I think, Chair, there is as you know, there is a new chief executive there who at this stage has shown a lot of willing to work with us. There's been some very positive meetings over recent months, so hopefully we can take on board whatever criticism panel's making and make some progress.
Yeah, I think the committee felt quite strongly about trying to develop a better relationship with Valleys to Coast and to have more cooperation in terms of their function and our responsibilities. Okay, anybody else wish to speak on this? On anything? I know we're all very familiar because we've spent hours and hours compiling these recommendations, so it's understandable that everybody that's had things to say about it has already spoken. But I'll take us then to page 24 and the recommendation at 9. And 9.1, the committee is recommended to endorse the cross-party recovery panel's findings and recommendations as attached in Appendix A to be submitted on the 15th of September to Cabinet as part of the recovery process. Can I have a mover? Yeah. Yes.
Chair, if I may, I thought you were going to go through the rest of the recommendations. I didn't realise we were jumping to the final. On recommendation 14,
yes,
it would just be helpful to me just to understand that. It's regarding a contingency strategic COVID-19 plan. I just wanted to be clear what that was and what the expectations were.
Right, Stuart, would you like to address that?
Certainly, Cheryl. And I think that this came from the panel. This came in relation to the potential whether the leader would utilise the vacant cabinet member post that is currently vacant and has been held vacant for some while, but it sort of morphed into the fact, I believe the recommendation ultimately came from Councillor Martin Jones, I think it was, that wanted to make sure that the appropriate strategies were in place should there be a second or third wave. Martin, am I getting that right? Martin, is Martin here? Can't remember.
Yes, he is here.
Yes, he is.
Do you wish to speak, Martin?
Good afternoon, all.
Martin, was I along the right routes with that? You just wanted to make sure that the certain strategies and the financial aspects were sort of laid out bare so that they were ready should there be that direct impact again.
Yes, that particular recommendation was crafted along the lines of what lessons have been learned managing our responsibilities with the first wave. For example, what did we do well? What we didn't do particularly well? What can we learn? So we have put a plan together. So if a second wave hits us and Welsh Government then implement a total lockdown like they did during the months of April, May and June, that we have this plan and then we can just take this plan off the top shelf and roll it out across the borough. Of course, the plan needs to be fluid. It needs to be fluid and have financial resilience to support. That's capital finance, set up costs to support such organisations like BAVO, but also have a revenue budget then to take us through that particular lockdown period. So it's about basically generating and implementing a bespoke COVID lockdown plan.
Right, does that answer your question, Mark?
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. That's a helpful explanation. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else wish to speak? Right, I will take us to the recommendations at line 1, A and B. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Move. John Spanswick.
John, right.
I'll second.
And Councillor Jane Gebby has seconded. Okay, right. Thank you very much for that. We'll now move on to the next item, item 5 on the agenda, the information report that was circulated to members last week, in advance actually of the agenda pack. Now obviously this isn't a scrutiny report, it's an information report and we don't have anyone to present it as such. I do have some concerns that it's been sent as an information report because there are reds on this report and it would have been nice to have been able to have asked questions on those because some of them are quite concerning. So I don't know how everybody feels about this, but has anybody got any comments on this report? I'm sorry there's no one that will be able to directly answer your questions if you have any, but maybe that's something that we need to really address in this committee today. Mark Shepherd.
Yes, Chair. I suppose just following on from your comments really, and a brief conversation I had with Laura earlier, and I would tend to concur with you really that what might make sense is that for this particular item, whenever it appears at the Corporate Scrutiny Committee, that the relevant directors are present to present an overview in the same way as we would, for example, at the corporate performance assessment. So it's a very similar process, really, isn't it, where we go through the reds and the ambers. And my personal view is that would potentially present stronger scrutiny and greater opportunity really for
Yes.
member involvement in terms of, I suppose to a large extent, just understanding really where what the reasons are for if a target hasn't been met or if indeed sometimes it's been exceeded. So with your permission, Chair, if that is a recommendation that the committee wanted to make, we could certainly look at that. I mean, I wouldn't suggest you make it a regular feature to use up all your time, but there must be something even on an annual basis where there's a sense in the directors, together with myself, coming along and being able to answer those detailed questions for you.
Well, thank you, Mark. I mean, obviously, if everything was green, it would be understandable that there would be nothing to question. But when you have reds, I think there should be an opportunity here for members of this committee to be able to ask questions of the directors or their representatives, whoever is most appropriate, to explain to us what is being done and what targets are being set, etc., etc. You know, the Greens, fair comment, we wouldn't expect anyone where they're meeting their targets and everything is going the way they want it. But I do think Reds need more scrutiny, and without being able to ask questions here, I don't think we're doing scrutiny in the way that it should be done, and certainly probably Wales Audit Office would want us to handle this. Right, do I have any members that wish to speak on this? No? Deafening silence. Well, could I have an indication from members, please, if they feel that in the future we would like to have someone to address, if it's only the red things. Well, yes, I can see a number agreeing here. Councillor Shaw, Councillor Bennell, Councillor Clark, and more people are typing. So I think, Mark, you could take that as a yes, directors. We would like to see directors or the most suitable person, depending on the report. So if that could be arranged, not for Greens, just for important factors that may not be progressing as desired.
Well, the opportunity to explain, so I think that's not a problem, so we'll sort that out.
Thank you for that. Is everyone happy? Yeah, well, nobody has indicated that they wish to speak at this point. Right, well, we'll move to the recommendation. And shall we say we will note the report and then add in our concerns that we do need directors to address parts of the report that are not going according to plan or are not achieving what it had hoped to achieve. We all agreed? Can I have a mover for that then, please? Yeah, John Paul has moved. John Paul, Councillor Blundell has moved.
Second, Ross.
Councillor Penhill Thomas has seconded. Is there anyone in disagreement at this point? No? Okay. Thank you very much for that. I have no urgent items on the agenda, so I will, rather surprisingly, declare the meeting closed at 2:35. Can I thank everyone for their attendance this afternoon?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.